Hi, welcome to our Book of Daniel Prophecies Bible Studies. We're going to try to make this short. We don't want large videos, so we'll go to the point. The Book of Daniel the whole book is about worship. So that's a point that the prophet tries to go through throughout the whole book. And in that book, we find many prophecies, starting at the time of Daniel when he was in Babylon, going all the way to end times, to our times. The book starts with chapter 1, of course, is the story of how Daniel got to Babylon. It's a pretty well-known story, but we'll go over it a little bit. But we'll focus mostly on chapter 2, where the first prophecy takes place. So it starts, as I said, around 539 BC when Daniel was taken captive to Babylon, and Israel was taken captive. Daniel is taken to a new land. He's given a new name. He's introduced to new foods. Everything changes around him, but he decides to stay loyal. As I said, the whole book is about loyalty to God. And he decides to stay loyal. He becomes a very important person, very smart guy, studies a lot, works really hard, becomes a very important person in the Babylon kingdom. And so he ends up becoming one of the wise men in Babylon. So then the chapter 1 ends, and then chapter 2 begins. And chapter 2 begins with the current king, Babylonian's current king, explaining and having a dream. He kind of positions us where exactly in time he was. It says, verse 1 of chapter 2, Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. Second year of his reign, he had a dream. It was believed that happened approximately in the spring of 604 before Christ. Okay? So then Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. The dream was so amazing that he couldn't fall back asleep. You know, when you have that dream that, you know, it wakes you up and you just can't sleep anymore. And that's what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. So then he rounds, chapter 2 says, then he gave the command to call all the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, and to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream, meaning he wants to know the meaning of the dream. So then the Chaldeans, the wise men, they tell King Nebuchadnezzar, so just, you know, tell us the dream. What is it? Let's try to figure it out. So the king says, well, I'm not telling you the dream because it's easy for you guys to just make stuff up. So he says, my decision is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces and your houses shall be made as ash heap. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. So the king is not a fool. He says, you know what, guys, I'm not going to tell you something just so you can make stuff up. If you're really that wise, if you're magicians, if you're astrologers, and if you can do divinations, just tell me what I dreamt and tell me what it means. But then everybody was astonished. They said, well, I don't think that anyone is able to do that. I've never heard of anything happen like that. So the Chaldeans said, we can't do it. The king gets very upset, and he basically fulfills his promise. He says, for this reason the king was angry and very furious. That's verse 12 of chapter 2. For this reason the king was angry and very furious and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out and they began killing the wise men. So the killing started. He was serious about it. If you're not going to tell me what happened, and if you can't do what you say you can do, right? If you can't tell me my dream, you're not wise men, you're not magicians, you're not astrologers. You can't do it. So then Arioch, he sends his chief of the guard and starts killing all these wise men. So the decree went out and they began killing, verse 13, the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then, with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. So Arioch was in charge of killing all these guys. Verse 15, he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel went and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Daniel says, okay, well, wait a second, I wasn't there when he asked for all of those things. Give me some time so that I can try to figure it out. So then, verse 17, then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his 3 companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So then the secret was revealed to Daniel in the night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So then Daniel, he calls his friend. He said, let's pray. Let's ask God because we're the king sent us and we have a limited amount of time. The king sent his captain to get us all, to kill all the wise men, we included. So let's pray to God. And I'm pretty sure he can reveal it to us. And God did. Verse 19 says, then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So when he went to bed, he went to sleep, and God revealed his what the king had dreamt and what it meant to him. Then it follows verse 20 to 23. Daniel, there's a prayer from Daniel thanking God. He says, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's demand. Daniel is very thankful. So then he calls in on Arioch, verse 24. He went to Arioch and said, take me to the king, I'm ready. Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king its interpretation. So then he takes Daniel, and we go through verse 25. He takes Daniel to the king, and the king says, well, I'm waiting. I stopped everything, and now you need to tell me what's going on. So Daniel starts. Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. So he talks about this huge image, a big statue, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, the chest and arms of silver, its abdomen and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly of clay. So he tells of this big image, a big statue. The head was gold, the chest and arms were silver, its belly and thighs were bronze, and its legs of iron. And then the feet were all either part clay and part iron. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, the wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So Daniel says, while you were watching on verse 34, you watched, and while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. That was verse 34. So it says this big image, different metals, right? Head, as we said, head of gold, chest and arms of silver, and then bronze, and then iron, and then clay and iron mixed together for the feet. And then all of a sudden you see this huge stone that the Bible is pretty specific, says cut without hands, came and hit the stone in its feet. And then the whole thing just became ashes, was swept away by the wind, and this stone grew. On verse 35 at the end of it, it says, and the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So this stone became very big and basically took over the whole world. This is the dream. And on verse 36, and now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. So it starts on verse 37, you, O king. So he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar and says, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. Verse 38, and wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hands and has made you the ruler of them all. You are this head of gold. So then Daniel says, okay, you, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, that was the first kingdom. That's where Daniel was. You are the head of gold. You are the king of, and that's what it meant by the head of gold. Babylon was full of gold, one of the richest empires there was. But after you, verse 39, Daniel chapter 2, verse 39. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. Verse 40, first part of the verse 40. He says, well, after you, there's going to be another kingdom that's going to be raised inferior to yours. So you notice that the head of gold, that's the most expensive metal. And then the chest and the arms of silver, well, that's inferior to yours, right? Silver is inferior to gold. He says he's going to be inferior to yours. After him, there's going to be another kingdom that will reign all over the earth, but he will be even more inferior than you. He'll be of bronze, and he shall rule all over the earth. And then the fourth kingdom, verse 40, shall be as strong as iron, Rome, right? So if we go through the kingdoms that historically, the kingdoms that fell one after the other, we have Babylon, the head of gold. And then he says, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. And that is what came after Daniel, and what came after Babylon, and that was Persia. Persia came after Babylon, and it reigned all over the Mid East, all the way to India, all the way to Greece. I don't know if you've ever watched that movie 300, but that's all about Persia trying to conquer Greece, and that's where they stopped. Soon after that, the Daniel says there's going to be a third kingdom made of bronze. That was the hips, the abdomen, and thighs of bronze, inferior, which shall rule all over the earth. Once the Persian Empire ended, Alexander the Greek king, ruled all over the earth very, very rapidly, very fast. Alexander became conquered the lands from Greece, Macedonia, Mid-East, Saudi Arabia right now, where Syria is, went all the way where Iraq and Iran is nowadays, and went all the way to India, although he couldn't really conquer that whole territory. And then after that, after Alexander, with his divided empire, the next big empire of the world was the Roman Empire, and that was what verse 40 says. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, in as much as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. Rome became one of the biggest empires known to us. And it never really ended. Rome never really ended. It's just, any historical book that you read, there isn't really an ending to the empire of Rome. It just slowly faded into the other tribes. And where you saw the feet and toes, that's verse 41 of chapter 2, okay? Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And then verse 43, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom. So let's talk about verse 41, 42, and 43. He says, so where you saw the legs, right? Rome became very strong, but it never really, as I said, it never really ended. Rome just faded away. Slowly, the barbaric tribes kind of invaded a territory, occupied space, because Rome was never really a big occupying force. The way Rome conquered was going into the territory, imposing the culture, but the tribes and the way people lived stayed about the same. So that was just culture being transferred into Rome, and slowly Rome fade away as time went on and on. The tribes that existed, the 10 tribes that existed in the area, kind of invaded, and that's what become what we know today as Europe, right? France with the Franks and the Saxons in England, and the Anglo-Saxon in England, the Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and it was a total of about 10 tribes that became what we know today as Portugal, Spain, France, England, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Romania, and so on and so forth, right? They became all these kingdoms, and then it evolved into what became Middle Age Europe. So as it says here that as the toes and the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Throughout Europe's history, you're going to have kingdoms that are weaker and those who are stronger, and then those who were weaker before, they suddenly become strong, and then you'll have mixing and matching, and these kingdoms will just evolve through history and become the current what we know today as Europe. And then the Daniel continues. They said, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. It says, as you saw iron mixed with clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. So for the longest time, the different parts of Europe have been mixing with each other, right? The royal blood, they've been marrying blood with blood. They've been marrying all these different people together, and at some point, I believe, was Queen Victoria was known as Europe's grandmother because she had children all over the place. They basically belonged to the same family, but they were never able to coalesce. They were never able to make one single kingdom. Like Daniel said, they will in verse 42, verse 43, as you saw iron mixed with clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. They tried between them, but it never happened. Later, there were attempts from other conquerors. Napoleon, most famously, Hitler also tried to unify the whole Europe, or his point was the whole world, but they all tried, and none of them were able to. At some point, they all broke. And that's what Daniel prophesied. That was verse 43. And in the days of these kings, verse 44, and in the day of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So Daniel said, after the days of these mixing and mingles, and the days that these tribes are trying to get together, at the end of all of this, there's going to be a big stone that's going to come and destroy all of this history. It says, this hand, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass. So Daniel basically says, at the end of these years, by the end of the times, there's going to be a big stone not cut by hand that will soon become and fill all the earth. And basically the stone represents Jesus, the rock. And it'll grow and occupy the whole earth and have a transformed earth and occupy basically just everything, and will bring peace and end to centuries of quarrel, centuries of dissonance in the universe, and will fill the earth, and the earth will be made new again. That's chapter 2 of Daniel. The dream that the king had, the statue, and the explanation in the Bible itself. Okay? After this, the king was very happy. He became, verse 43, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. The king answered Daniel and said, truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal the secret. He was happy. He praised God for it. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Also Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his three friends, over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That's the prophecy. That's the dream that the king had. And that's the prophecy and that's the interpretation that the Bible gives us. It seems like it's a very historical fact. In 1604, in 604 before Christ, Daniel talks about this prophecy, described this to the king, and describes what will happen throughout the next 1,000 years in Europe. Since Daniel, it's been 2,600 years, and basically the dream that the king had, that Nebuchadnezzar had on chapter 2, described the whole story of the world from the point that Daniel was all the way to our days. He says Babylon will be great. After him, there's going to be another empire of silver that will be Persia. What happened was Persia. And after Persia, there's going to come another empire. It won't be as great as Persia, but will dominate the whole world. And that was Greece. And for many, many years, Greece was all there was, starting with Alexander the Great, then dividing through his 4 generals. And then after Greece, he says it's going to be an iron empire. Then Rome comes and destroys and crushes everything, becomes this huge empire that dominates the world for hundreds of years, all the way to the beginning of the Middle Ages, where these tribes that were part of the Roman Empire simply started changing the culture from the inside, and Rome never really disappeared. It just mutated into what we know later became the different tribes that became the different countries that we know today: Portugal, Spain, France, England, Germany, Italy, so on and so forth. And these tribes, as time goes on, war happens with each other, like Daniel says. You know, as the iron doesn't mix with the clay, some will be weak, some will be strong, and those roles will be interchangeable. And then in one time of history, one is strong, and another time of history, the other one is strong. There's war all the time throughout the Middle Ages in Europe, until later, at the end of the Middle Ages, Europe starts to grow, and all these different kingdoms start to try to mingle together. Like the dream says, they're going to try to do things. They're going to try to unite through the seed of men by, getting all these different kings together and marrying with each other, trying to connect all the different royal families. They just can't. They just unable to do it, until finally Napoleon comes, gives it the first try. Unable to do it, fails. Then other people try. Hitler tries again, unable to do it in the late 1940s. And up to this day, Europe is still a separated country, a disconnected country. But then the prophecy says at the end of the history, when we're at the toes, there's going to be this big stone. And I like the fact that it says that it's cut without hands. It means there's no human intervention. If the stone is cut without hands, there is no human intervention. This stone just comes out, hits the statue at the bottom, at the end of human history. It hits the statue, makes all of that ash, destroys all that happened before, and then grows to a point and becomes just the whole earth, occupies the whole earth, and that represents Jesus. That represents the new kingdom that he will form and transform us. I hope this was useful to you to understand a little bit. Of course, this is a pretty fast-paced Bible study. You can leave some comments in the bottom of this video if you're not sure. Or if you have questions about what I just said, if you don't agree, or if you didn't understand a part of it, and we'll be more than glad to clarify it, of course. The Bible is very clear. It explains itself. And all we're going to do throughout all of these prophetic studies, Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all we're going to do is the Bible will explain itself. Using only the Bible, we'll be able to understand history and understand where we are today, in the current era, in the current day. So God bless you very much, and I hope you liked our video. Hit subscribe, of course, at the bottom, and hit that little bell so that you'll be warned that we uploaded our new video. We'll be uploading new videos pretty soon. We have another channel in Portuguese and another channel in Spanish. And the purpose here is not to become YouTube sensation. It's just to share. We want you to share this video, spread the word, share it with your friends. That's why we're making these short videos, just to so that people have with the short attention span that we have these days. We're making these short videos just to make quick explanations. And if there are any questions, feel free to write them down. God bless you. Have a good evening.